And the point is that we need to be a Bible-centered people. And as we start to tease with the novelties of our vain imagination, we find ourselves in the mode of what I call pontificating grand truths while staring at our navels. And I just find this approach becoming more and more common. Here's the problem, folks. You need to take a look at, as we're going to look at two different examples today of this kind of thinking, and I want you to focus on the thinking. Don't get caught up in the names that I mentioned. I've got two names that I'm going to use, two folks that I'm going to use as an example, but I don't want you to focus on them. I want you to recognize that there are a lot more folks in Christendom who think like they do than think like us, than think like me, who look to the Scriptures as their sole infallible rule of faith and practice. Those are my boundaries. If I'm bound by Scriptures, then I should have some boundaries in my thinking and in my theology and how I go about doing that. If that isn't the message of Pilgrim's Progress, think about that once for a second. Pilgrim's Progress shows us that one stray step leads to another, and before you know it, you're so far off the path that leads to righteousness, the path of the truth, you can't even see it anymore. That's what Michael Sattler's talking about. You know, I'll give you an example, for instance. Have you ever had a car that just won't steer straight? The alignment's just out just enough to where you kind of have to pull it back. Maybe if you're on a tilted road, it'll go straight, but ultimately if you're on a flat road, it always wants to pull to one side or the other. And so you have to compensate with the steering wheel to keep it going straight down the road. Like that car, the novelty of our imagination as we tease with the externals that go on beyond that which we are, beyond the boundaries of Christendom, they will lead us astray. We start going down that road, and then we wonder why it gets so rough, we wonder why it gets so bumpy, and we wonder why we sometimes crash. Or we find ourselves in a town like Vanity Fair, wondering how we got here. You got to think about that stuff. You know, don't let it become the norm for you. You need to look for that narrow road. I want to walk the narrow road. I don't want to be on the wide way. Don't you? And as we're teasing with the interesting and the novel of thought, those are worldly things. The world will tantalize us with more than just things like pornography and all the other things that are just, they hit you upside the head. There's those subtle things that the world infiltrates your thinking and changes your worldview in such a way that now you have shifted and you've taken that first step off of the narrow path. You know, you think about how this works, how this starts out. Most folks are familiar with the concept of a news tease. In the news tease, they are what TV news anchors use or say to convince viewers to watch the newscast or to continue watching the newscast. Coming up at 10, man bites dog and lives to tell about it. Or coming up next, and they want to string you along to keep you watching and keep your attention focused right with them. And what they're actually doing is they're appealing to your curiosity with the concepts that are interesting, with things that are interesting. And they want to gain your attention and they want to keep your attention because that's how they get paid. Well, in the same way as the church teases with the interesting, the idea where that goes is the promotion of new ideas. And those new ideas are, I mean, they're not just like I use the example, Batman and Superman. That's absurd. Okay? These things are presented to the church in pursuit of that which is valuable, in pursuit of new concepts and things that, you know what, you really should be thinking about this, or shouldn't we be doing things like this? The problem is that they are bringing to you novelties of thought, appealing to your curiosity. And I love this one. I heard this last year, and it just I about fell out of my chair. I like to read so-and-so. I find him really interesting. Yeah, I know that he really doesn't follow the scriptures, but he's a deep thinker. He thinks about things that most Christians don't think about. And yeah, I know he doesn't believe in inerrancy, and he reads the scriptures in a nuanced manner. But I find him interesting, and I think you could learn a lot, and your horizons would broaden by reading him. I read him all the time, and I just find him really fascinating. What's just happened here? A vehicle has been introduced to you in the way of the fascination with the liberal author. So you've got a conservative, reformed man who's just posited the idea that his conservative flock, and when I use the term conservative, please don't get me wrong, I'm not using that in a political way. There is liberal thought when it comes to the scriptures. John Dominic Crossan would be one example. As he sees it, it's all a parable, dummy. You can go back and listen to that debate and follow his train of thought and the way he approaches the scriptures. You ever wonder why everything that these guys say seems to be so upside down from how you read the scriptures? Because they're liberal theologians. A conservative theologian looks to the scriptures and, like we did on Tuesday, wants to learn from them and extrapolate from the scriptures information that the scriptures are actually presenting. But the vehicle that can take you from that conservative way of thinking into liberal worldviews and thoughts and ideas is the interesting. I find him interesting. I think you can benefit from reading him. Your world will grow. Sounds really noble, right? But in point of fact, it's just a tease. It's no different than the news tease.